You know, the greatest strategic failure is believing a large purchase requires a large pitch, a massive, high-pressure sales effort aimed at closing a skeptical buyer. But what if that's just completely wrong? What if the entire sales battle is won not through some overwhelming force, but at the lowest possible point of friction? This is the core question we're digging into today as we break down the blueprint for growth without chaos. We're going to go way beyond the surface-level advice to get at the deep, structural mechanics that let an organization scale up its output without blowing up its internal systems. Think about it. This quote really challenges a core assumption about how persuasion works. The common wisdom says, big commitment, you need a big effort, right? To land that major client, you've got to build this massive, overwhelming case. But what happens? It just creates resistance. The buyer's defenses go up, they get more skeptical, and suddenly the whole thing turns into this battle of wills. You're not focused on solving their problem anymore. You're just focused on winning your argument. It's just inefficient. It's high friction, and honestly, it's just not aligned with how people actually think. Okay, so now let's imagine a different path, the path of least resistance. What if the journey to that big final purchase isn't one giant scary leap, but a whole series of tiny, low-friction steps? This strategy taps into something really powerful in our psychology. It's called the commitment and consistency bias. See, we all have this deep-seated need to act in ways that are consistent with what we've already done. So by getting a small, easy yes up front, like an agreement to a simple statement, a click on a link, downloading a free guide, you're not just getting a minor win. No, you're setting a psychological trajectory. The big purchase at the end suddenly feels less like a huge new decision and more like the next logical step on a path they already chose. And here is the crucial pivot for our entire discussion today. That powerful idea of the small yes, the strategy of winning the battle at the lowest point of friction, that's not just some clever sales tactic. It is a fundamental, unyielding law for building scalable operations. The exact same logic that pulls a buyer forward can be engineered right into the DNA of your company, letting it grow smoothly, predictably, and without collapsing into the chaos that just destroys so many fast-growing businesses.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we'll dive into the paradox of scale and see how that small yes applies to how you run your business. Then we'll define the chaos mechanism that is silently undermining so many companies. From there, we'll build the system for stability to fight back, understand the psychology of process that makes it all work for actual human beings, and finally, lay out a clear blueprint for mastery that you can actually use. So how does a sales metaphor really apply to the nitty-gritty day-to-day reality of scaling a business? Well, in operations, the small yes isn't about a customer. It's about getting your own team to agree to a fundamental principle before things get too complicated. It's that early proactive decision to commit to a single standard way of doing a critical task. This small upfront agreement on process is really the only defense you have against the confusion that is guaranteed to come when you start adding more people, more clients, and more work. And that right there is the core realization. It's the paradox so many leaders miss. They start to fear growth because they've been burned by it before. They connect it with the pain of putting out fires all day, watching quality drop, and seeing their best people burn out. But growth itself is never the enemy, it's the goal. The real enemy is the uncontrolled, unpredictable friction that growth exposes. It's the chaos that pops up when your internal systems just aren't ready for the bigger load. The small yes is accepting that you have to build the systems first. Okay, so to defeat this enemy, we first have to give it a name. We need to know exactly what we're fighting. We need to identify the mechanism that's generating all the friction, all the errors, and all the stress inside a growing company. It's this quiet, sneaky force that works against every single thing you do to try and scale efficiently, and it turns the excitement of growth into an execution crisis. And here it is, the true enemy of scale is variability of outcome. This is the heart of the chaos mechanism. It's a simple idea, but its consequences are absolutely devastating. Imagine you ask 5 different people on your team to do the exact same task, say, onboard a new client. If you don't have a standard process, you won't get one predictable result 5 times. Nope, you'll get 5 completely different outcomes, each with its own level of quality, its own speed, its own accuracy. This variability is the root cause of almost all operational chaos. Now, what's really interesting here is how this visualizes the invisible problem. So you've got employee A, your veteran, right? They've perfected their own way of doing things. The quality is amazing, but it's slow and it only exists in their head, which makes them a bottleneck. Then there's employee B, who's trying to be fast, using bits and pieces of tribal knowledge they've picked up, but they're making errors that someone else has to clean up later. And then you have employee C, maybe a newer person,
who's trying to copy employee A but doesn't have the full picture, so their results are all over the place. The key insight here? None of these are bad employees. They are good people stuck in a broken system. The system itself is actually designed to produce this friction.
So, if variability of outcome is the disease, what's the cure? Well, the answer isn't to just work harder or try to hire more superstars. The answer is a system, a deliberate, engineered approach designed to systematically stamp out that variability. And this system is built on 3 foundational pillars that work together to create predictable, stable, and, ultimately, scalable growth.
These are the 3 pillars. It's a sequence. First, you have to document the blueprint. You capture the single best way to do a critical task. Second, you use that document to standardize the process, making sure everyone on the team does it the exact same way every time. And third, and this is key, once and only once that process is standardized, you can build the automation bridge, which lets you scale your output without just hiring more and more people.
Let's just focus on that first pillar for a second, documentation. And I know it sounds boring, but this isn't about creating bureaucracy. This is one of the most strategic things a company can do. It's about getting the right way to do something out of one person's head and turning it into a company asset. This single act transforms that fragile, risky tribal knowledge, which by the way can walk right out the door, into a durable, scalable asset that the company owns. The impact is huge and it's immediate. It dramatically speeds up training for new people, it slashes the time it takes for them to become productive, and it makes sure the best practices from your top performers get copied across the whole organization. Now, documentation and standardization, they're incredibly powerful all on their own. They bring clarity, consistency, and quality. But they are also the non-negotiable foundation for the real endgame of efficient growth, automation. And this leads us to the final, most powerful pillar of the system, which is governed by a single, unbreakable rule.
This is it. This is the fundamental principle that so many companies get wrong. You cannot automate chaos. You just can't. You can't tell a piece of software to do a task that's done 5 different ways by 5 different people. It's like trying to give a robot 5 conflicting sets of instructions at the same time. It's just going to fail. Standardization, which comes from your documentation, creates the clear, logical, step-by-step blueprint that automation absolutely needs. This is why standard operating procedures, or SOPs, are the absolute prerequisite for any automation project to succeed.
And this right here perfectly illustrates that final pillar. Your SOP isn't just a boring document, it is the automation bridge. It's the direct path from your documented best practices to true capital-efficient scale. That SOP becomes the literal instruction manual you hand off to software, to APIs, to other tools to handle all the low-value repetitive stuff. This is how you finally break the link between volume and headcount. It's how you double your output without having to double your team size. This is the real engine of profitable growth, and it's all built on that bedrock of documentation and standardization. Okay, at this point, a system built on documentation, rules, and standards, it might sound a little rigid, right? Maybe even stifling to human creativity and morale. But here's the paradox. The exact opposite is true. When you do it right, this system is actually profoundly human-centric. So let's shift gears and look at the psychological reasons this system works so well for the actual people who have to work inside it. This side-by-side really reveals the hidden mental tax of a chaotic workplace. Without SOPs, every task has a high cognitive load. Your team members are constantly burning their limited mental energy just figuring out how to do their job. They're facing decision fatigue for making hundreds of tiny, repetitive choices all day long. But with SOPs, that cognitive load is dramatically reduced. The how is already defined, it's clear, it's consistent. This frees up their valuable brainpower to focus on higher-value strategic work, solving unique customer problems, improving the system itself. It takes away the fear of making a mistake and massively reduces the risk of burnout. So the crucial point is this. This system isn't about turning talented people into robots. It's about freeing them from the robotic work. By creating a stable, predictable foundation for how work gets done, you empower your team to stop wasting energy on the tiny details of how a task is done. Instead, they can start thinking about why the task is important. And even better, what's next? How can we make this process even better? It elevates them from just executing tasks to having strategic ownership. Okay, we've gone through the theory, we've defined the chaos, and we understand the psychology. Now let's get practical. How do you actually start to implement this stuff in your own organization? We're going to translate all these ideas into an actionable framework, a clear 3-step path you can follow to get mastery over your own growth. Here are the 3 steps. Step 1, audit the bottlenecks. The biggest mistake you can make is trying to document everything all at once. That just leads to paralysis. So instead, you apply the 80-20 rule. Find the 20% of tasks that are causing 80% of your friction, your errors, your delays. Start right there. Second, when you do document, use the 80-20 documentation rule. Just aim for a clear, concise guide that captures the core 80% of the process. Clarity is way more important than perfection. And third, you test every single document with the ultimate stress test, the new hire benchmark.
This right here, this is the gold standard. The new hire benchmark is the final objective test of whether your SOP is actually any good. The question is simple, but it's unforgiving. Can a brand new hire with zero tribal knowledge take your document and, just by following it, achieve the same quality and efficiency as one of your seasoned vets? If the answer is yes, you haven't just written a document, you have successfully encoded excellence into a repeatable process. You've created a real corporate asset that can actually scale. So as we wrap this up, I want to boil this entire philosophy down to its single essential truth. Everything we've talked about, from the small yes to the automation bridge, from cutting down cognitive load to the new hire benchmark, it's all working towards one fundamental, overarching goal. It works because it builds repeatable systems that eliminate friction. That's it. That is the whole game. It is the cold, hard logic of engineering applied to the messy, chaotic reality of a growing business. By systematically finding, documenting, and standardizing the sources of friction in your company, you're no longer just managing a business. You are engineering a machine, one that's predictable, efficient, and capable of scaling without breaking down. You're building stability by design. So I'll leave you with this one final, actionable thought. As you think about your own team or your own organization, try to resist the urge to ask, how can we grow faster? Instead, I want you to ask a much more powerful question. Where is our greatest source of internal friction? What is the very first bottleneck that you are going to audit? Because the answer to that question, that's the first step on the path to growth without chaos.